Hi, this is Ken Adams, and welcome to City Beat. And this week, my guest is Jim Lewis on City Council of Salem, Ward 8. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you.
And one of the big topics that is going on right now with the city is the Salem Police Facility. There was a bond issue that was on the ballot last November, and it failed, so it's back again. So maybe you could explain a little bit what's different about this bond issue and whether you're in favor of it or not.
Well, I'm certainly in favor of it. I think one of the things that I haven't found anybody to disagree with is that we need to do something. The police facility in its current state is, and these are my words, dysfunctional. And it's been that way for over 25 years. There was a lot of work put into it. In my opinion, the city was wise to reach out to professional consultants who do this for a living as opposed to just leaving it internal. And I think that was a wise decision. The first ballot measure, it depends on who you talk to. But the folks that I've talked to, it was too much, just too much money and too big, going from what many hear is 28,000 square feet to 148,000 square feet. That's a big jump. A couple of things what folks need to realize is that 28,000 square feet is
Totally inadequate.
Yeah, and it isn't even the total amount right now. It's well over 30,000 square feet that the city utilizes for police facilities, just that they're off-site.
And sometimes quite a distance away from the downtown area.
Yeah, the best example I've heard is the emergency SWAT vehicles. If you have an emergency situation, you don't want to necessarily be waiting 5 minutes for the truck to come and get you. It'd be better to have it right there at the facility. With the new facility, that'll happen. With the current facility, it can't. But what I heard was too much and too big, and so. I was on the committee that helped put the first one together. I still think that it might have been the best for Salem in the long run, but I recognize even more so now that folks can only look out so far. So what, as a practical matter, happened was the 911 center that was going to be included, the regional 911 center, that is in an appropriate place right now, not a lot of room for growth, and there needs to be some kind of barrier put in front so somebody doesn't drive a truck through it. That 911 center was taken out, and also there was a reduction in square footage based on the assumption of how many officers per year that the city will grow. Historically, using arithmetic, it's been about 1.8. Some years it's been less than that. But the total reduces it from 148 to 115,000 square feet, and the cost is down by about 20 million to, I think it's 61.8 million. There was a side issue with some folks because when you go back to the beginning of the conversation about let's redo the police facility, the original plan was to have it be on the Civic Center site.
Right.
And that quite possibly could have included upgrades for the library. You do it all as a package. But that site was deemed inappropriate.
Too small, basically.
Yeah, too small for any type of true growth. And so it had to move off-site. And in my opinion, that's when there was a disconnect between the police facility and the library. Not that both aren't important, but they were together, and once the decision was made to look off-site, they were separated, in my opinion. A lot of discussion around it. There was a lot of concern in this community, as there should be, about the fear about the big one. And the decision was made to not couple those two issues. And in fact, there was a vote on the council floor that did not pass. It tied 4-4, and it would have included about $20 million for seismic improvements for the library.
At the same time
At
as
the
the
same
police.
time as this measure. When I first came to Salem, the community was asked to pass what was called a cops and kids measure. And it was some money for the police and some money for the schools. And it failed. And when you go back and ask the folks that run the campaign, why could people vote against police and kids? And they said, voters don't like combinations. They like separate issues. One issue, yes or no. And I've believed that all these years. I think a lot of people believe that. That was the advice that we were given. That's one of the reasons that the library was not included. The other one is that the cost to do both would have brought the total amount back up close to what the voters rejected. And so for those two reasons, I agreed that it was best to separate those, but with the commitment to bring to the voters in November a ballot measure that will, in fact, seismically upgrade the library. This November, this year.
Right.
So there'll be 2 ballot measures rather than 1.
And there'll be actually a third one because you'll have to do something with City Hall once the police have relocated, because that needs retrofitting and some upgrades as well.
Right. Yeah, as you bring back departments that are now off-site and bring them back into the Civic Center, there'll have to be some remodeling. But the police facility, from what I hear, the police won't be moving out for as much as 3 years.
Right, but they have to be out before you can really start working on
Correct.
City Hall, because you have a different standard with the police there.
Yep. And I'm not sure when and if a ballot measure would come up for the fixing up of the Civic Center. You know, that's something that right now is far enough down the road. It's not a crisis.
Well, I heard that that was probably going to be in the realm of about 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Assuming everything else kind of fits
As
together.
you get older, you want things to happen quicker.
Well, yeah, you'd like to see them. One of the things that kind of concerns me about the ballot measure coming in May, and I went back and looked at the last 3 elections for May 2011, 13, and 15, and those are very low turnout elections, generally 20, 25%. Mm-hmm. So that, and normally what I've seen in those kinds of elections, it's a very conservative type voter that comes out and votes in that. And I'm not sure how they're going to vote on the police facility.
Yeah, and I'm optimistic.
Okay.
And one of the reasons is because we were taught a lesson in November. I think we hear the message, and the need is great enough that you don't want to waste any more time. Let's get it done. And I believe that that the average voter will see it. I've been impressed. I've been in Salem for 17 years. I've been impressed with the common sense of the voters. The November 2016 election will always go down as one that you just look back and say, what happened?
On a whole lot of levels.
Yes, and I think they intertwined. I don't know if they were so separate that people would think crystal clearly about one without having all the other issues that were going on that day interfere. Or that
Plus,
time.
you know, in I'd say over the last 30 years or so, there's also been kind of a slant toward anti-government, basically, that the government can't do anything right and like that. And so you're kind of got a headwind when it comes to that issue.
I think we do here, even in Salem, but quite frankly, I would think so many other places are so much worse off than we are.
Well, that's true, but I mean, it's just something that's out there too. And I remember that Polk County didn't even have full-time sheriff's department working for like a number of years because they wouldn't pass a bond issue to finance it.
And there's an example of one that, that went out and failed, and they got better organized. They listened to the message of the Polk County residents, and they went out again, and it passed. Yeah. And I'm
yeah. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 shots to get that done.
you know, as far as the location and the sophistication of the police facility, I feel as though Salem is large enough now that we want a police facility that is, and I don't want to use the term state of the art. That can be left for places like Chicago, I think. But a facility that serves all the needs that we have in this area and sets us up to be able to continue to do that for 30 years. And if we run this one like we ran the last one, we'll be in it 60 years.
So there's a couple of other subjects that came up in the last city council meeting, and I was interested in your take on those. And one of them was Uber, Lyft, ride sharing, and also Airbnb. And so maybe you could explain what Airbnb is, because it took me a while to catch on to what this was about.
The only reason I'm familiar with it, and my app of choice is Vacation Rental by Owner. You can, let's say you want to go to San Diego for a week for a vacation, especially in March or April from here. You can look into the site and it'll have listings of homes that are for rent under conditions, and you can choose and then make the application and interact with the owner and rent the house. I use it. I'm a user, so it's tough to not disclose that. It's worked real well. I have found, for the most part, that that people like our family that go and visit, they're respectful. But I've also been in South Beach during spring break, not so respectful. But you can have those situations come up under normal occupancy.
Family visiting.
Yeah, families have parties too, not just vacationers. And I believe it's a way to, I don't know if creative is the right word, to allow a family to make some additional money, not a lot, but some, that in essence might support them going somewhere else and having a vacation. I have a brother who lives, he has property in Palm Springs. I love trading houses with him. But it's more like a trade. This is just another extension of it. You do it for money, and you organize it through the websites. Of course, there needs to be conditions. Every place I've gone, there are conditions. And
well, like parking, depending on what part of town you're in, that can be a big issue.
Yeah, and there are places where I stayed where there is no parking. Larger cities don't afford parking. So I understand the fear, because it's another example of the creativeness of business, I guess. And people are sometimes hesitant to embrace change, especially when it has some potential fears attached to it. I'm more inclined to let things be, and then if there are people who step over the line, you deal with them individually, rather than having to keep everybody from doing something that most could do well.
Yeah, actually, recently, after I started looking into Airbnb, I found out that a neighbor had moved here to Salem as a retirement place, but they still had some work life left, and they couldn't find a job here in Salem. So they had to go to Portland to get a job, but they had already bought a house that they liked the location of here in Salem, and they wanted to keep it, and that's what they started doing. But it's not, I don't think they're Airbnb, but it's kind of more like a bed and breakfast, and they have somebody that comes and takes care of the place.
Yeah. We, Salem allows, under certain circumstances, rules, bed and breakfasts in town now. I had someone say, I can't remember who, that Salem's rule is pretty loose, and by breakfast could be interpreted to be a box of Rice Krispies and a little thing of milk in the refrigerator. There's your breakfast. And the owners aren't there.
Right. Right.
If we're going to do it, I'll say this: if we're going to do it and going to allow it, I really hesitate to require owners to be there, because I look at myself and I can imagine saying to my kids, "Yeah, we're going to go rent a house in Boston, and the owners are going to be there, but everything's fine." I think people are looking for a certain level of privacy.
Well, I guess. I did bed and breakfast when I went to Ireland, and they did give you a huge breakfast. I didn't need to eat lunch. And, you know, it was kind of nice because there were other people there, and you could talk to them, and the owners were real nice.
It is a very attractive.
Well, not only that, but then they can tell you about where to find things in town. I remember that I wanted to go on this particular tour. She called up the tour people and had them come over to the house to pick me up. So, you know, if you're there on your own, you don't have that kind of support system.
Right. I have three older brothers. One of them owned a bed and breakfast right near the Oregon coast, and he loved it. And what he loved the most about it is the people that came in and how he could interact with them, just like you said. I'm more inclined when I have the opportunity to go on vacation. I'd rather check the web, do research, and kind of test myself as far as being the guide. And I've done fairly well at that.
So the other one is Uber and Lyft,
Right.
ride sharing. I'm thinking this is probably even more contentious, though. And I noticed in the last city council meeting, one of the things I found a little upsetting at the city council meeting is someone from Yellow Cab came, and they hadn't been notified, they hadn't been contacted by the city in advance.
Yeah, and I was surprised by that, and I think so too was Councilor Anderson. He made a motion or a directive to the city managers to do just that before this issue comes back. It's not a new issue. And the city has interacted with the Yellow Cab Company on numerous occasions already. I think we understand their points, and they're legitimate. If there's a way to create a level playing field for all ride-sharing companies, including cabs, to basically have a fairness out there so they can work in it, even though that might reduce some of the city's requirements that the Yellow Cabs are now under. Here's a good example. Uber does background checks, and the city of Salem requires that the city police department do the background checks. Is there room for negotiation there? You know, I'd like to know more about the background check company that Uber uses. Theoretically, if it does the job well enough, then there's the ability to lower that or even that playing field. It's funny, Uber is a philosophical issue, but I got to tell you,
It's a philosophical issue in what way?
it's a mindset change. It's a break from historical tradition. I mean, cabs are yellow.
Well, I see some
In
pink
some
ones.
places, yeah, in some places they're black and white. They're very traditionalist in what they do. And now with the advent of technology, those crazy little phones that have those apps on them, it opens up all kinds of options for unique type of businesses that can benefit customers and benefit the employee or the service provider. I got to tell you real quick, my Uber story. We were my family and I were coming home from vacation a couple of years ago, and our son and daughter took a different flight than my wife and I. And we each had a 5-hour layover in San Francisco. My wife and I sat in the San Francisco airport for 5 hours. My son and daughter got an Uber, went to a restaurant in San Francisco, and got an Uber back to the airport and spent less money on food and drinks and Uber
Then you did
at
at the
well,
airport.
the airport, yeah.
Which is real expensive.
5 hours of it, yeah, yeah. So, I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah, I've run into people though that are actually will not use Uber because they're afraid of who they're going to get.
And I've heard people say that about cabs too, especially the ones that are not the newest cabs and the newest drivers. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
I certainly think that it's less expensive to, in some cases, take a taxi. But I'm not to the point where I want to oppose one form of business because it may not complement or may not help other forms of business. I'm a free enterprise kind of guy, and to a limit, let competition let it see where it can bring us.
Yeah, I think you make a good point though about the background checks. How thorough they are, who's doing them is a very important issue.
Yes, yeah. I have to assume, and there are stories out there. I don't know if I believe every single story I read on the internet.
Well, that's good, Jim.
Yeah. But Uber is under a magnifying glass. If they have a consistent misperformances, issues, because they are so wide open, that'll get blasted to the websites and the Facebook pages pretty quickly. And so I think there is a kind of a watching out there. And
Everything's much more public these days.
It is.
Everybody's got a camera on them basically
Yeah.
these days.
Yep.
As we saw with United Airlines, they've had quite a bit of flack for, for their behavior. And this is an old established airline.
Yeah, yeah. People change all the time, and it's a matter of keeping up with it and not pushing too much. But it's always changing. I mean, I'm a kid who remember getting upset in a airport because I had to spend 7 cents for a big candy bar and it's supposed to be a nickel.
We won't say what year that was. But you represent Ward 8. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what the issues are with Ward 8 and where exactly are we talking about? Because some people know West Salem, but they don't know what Ward 8 means.
It's funny, a few years ago, West Salem got a large enough population where it wasn't able to stand as a single ward. And so there was some redistricting. Ward 1, which is right across the east side of the river, downtown, was part of West Salem was made part of Ward 1. It's basically the area right as you get off the bridge up to, I think, a little bit past Glen Creek. I call it the commercial area. Edgewater
Well, the
Street,
commercial area of West Salem.
with one exception, and that is Urban Grange Cafe. It's the only place I can sit down and have a cup of coffee in Ward 8. It's
Really?
It's strange ward. Yeah. The only
So
other,
it's mostly residential only.
completely residential, and people are. Again, I'm a city guy. The idea of intermingling commerce and people only makes sense.
Yes.
But there are some folks that are still under the belief, the feeling that out here is where I'm supposed to live, and over there is where I'm supposed to do my shopping. And so when you talk to them about bringing in commercialization into the inner part of Ward 8, it doesn't go over real well sometimes. It's coming though.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Well, I mean, I can talk about my own experience where I moved here to Salem about 10 years ago because I didn't want to necessarily have to drive. And so I live downtown Salem. I can walk to a grocery store, I can walk to the library, I can walk to City Hall, and that's what I wanted. Doesn't mean I do it every time, but I can do it. And one of the things that was on my mind as I get older, your driving skills erode. And so I didn't want to be one of those old folks out there driving, holding everybody up, doing, things that, drive other drivers crazy.
Right.
I wanted to be
Right.
able to do things by walking. And
I take as you've hit on something that I think is really neat. In the 17 years I've been in Salem, Salem has truly grown up in a way where it's starting to embrace central city living and moving around, and it's really neat. The first time that I saw was the Safeway going in on 12th Street. I lived in a small apartment at 12th and Chemeketa.
oh, okay.
And that was an example of the city growing up, not out. And we're starting to see signs. I mean, the developments downtown, just across the river, are bringing people, and people what makes everything thrive. And I think it's exciting, especially when you consider that the city of Salem is just in the last couple of years coming out of the recession. And a lot of this has happened during an economic downturn. I think it bodes well for the town. We are finally becoming a small city as opposed to a big town.
Yeah, and I live on Chemeketa, so I see lots of pedestrians, lots of bicyclists, lots of skateboarders going down that street because there's a lot of young people who don't have cars. And they use alternate kinds of ways of getting to work. And I think, well, I mean, it's nice living on a street where you see people, and when I used to live in Sacramento, I lived in a neighborhood, the garage door would go up,
Right.
the car would drive in, that's the last you see of them.
Right.
And I used to refer to it as, a house surrounded by a moat, because that's basically what you were saying.
Yeah.
And I think people are human because they want to be social.
I think, like I said earlier, we're always changing. There are still folks, and I may be partly that way, where when I go home after working, I like to go drive my car in the garage, close the door, go in, and have family time. Because in my job, when I was working, I'm interacting with people all day long. But I don't have any problem. I mean, my wife and I talk about moving into one of these apartments that are going in downtown as we get older. But I think Salem has a lot going for it, and we are evolving into what will draw people here.
Well, Jim, I want to thank you for coming on the show,
Okay.
to City Beat, and we'll be back next time.
All right.